Hello everyone. Thank you for joining me in my shop today. I have an interesting piano with some history that I'd like to present to you. I recently acquired it from a client of mine who was no longer interested in maintaining it, and I jumped at the opportunity to take it because it has such an interesting history as a piano. So without further ado, let's get to it. So, this piano is called a mirror piano. I think it's pretty obvious because there's a big mirror on the front as to why it would be called a mirror piano. So, the interesting history about a piano like this is that way back in the early 1900s, they used to make pianos much taller and more robust than they are now. This one used to be this tall as a taller piano. It also used to have a player mechanism in it, a pneumatic player mechanism. You can tell by this little cabinet here, this is where the pedals would fold down so you could pump the pneumatics. Anyway, this one was made in 1919 as a player piano of this height. And then around a little bit after World War II, it was difficult to obtain new supplies to make new pianos. So what some piano manufacturers or rebuilders were doing is they were taking these older, larger pianos, player pianos and such, taking out all the player parts and then cutting the case down to make this sort of smaller console shape, and then putting a mirror on the front so you wouldn't see the actual height. But you would still get the good sound from a larger piano. So this piano was originally made by the Clarendon Haddorff Company in 1919, and while I was restoring this, or at least doing work on it, I found two pennies in it, one from 1946 and one from 1947. And so I'm guessing that probably when this piano was cut down and the mirror was put on it and the player was removed, the people who worked on it actually left these pennies in here sort of as a date to show when the work was done. So I believe that originally it was built in 1919 and then it was modified into a mirror piano in 1946, 1947, somewhere around there. And it still sounds pretty good and it works pretty well after I've been able to get it back together. And there's some interesting things I'd like to show you about it that was done before I got it. So we will continue with that. Okay, now that we have the piano apart, we can get a good look at the insides. So this piano was manufactured by the Haddorff Piano Company under the name Clarendon. There's the serial number over here. It was made in 1919. I spent some work reshaping the hammers, regulating the action. I replaced the bridle straps, some of the leather in here. I replaced this. So we can tell this was a player piano, one, because there's a lot of room in there for player parts, but also because it has these little buttons here under the keys. So this is where the player thing, the system, would sit, and the pneumatics would push up on these to get the notes to play. So we can see, if I push up on that with my finger, I can get the note to play. So that's what would happen, is each one of the players, the player system would have a solenoid, that's what it's called, up to each one of those little buttons on the sticker of the action part, and it would push up when the perforated paper roll would tell it to. So we could tell that. We can also tell that it was cut down and reshaped. These blocks are not normal. This is not, usually you don't find these in a piano, so it's really very indicative that it was cut down and reshaped, and they put the front pieces in different places than they would normally be. There's one on each side. This side I actually had to shim because when it was put together, the top piece would actually rub against the top of the hammers and it wouldn't work. But since we're over here, we can look at the bass strings too. So normally in a piano, the bass strings are copper wound, but these strings are iron wound. Now there's some controversy as to whether it was necessary for these to be iron wound because there was a lack of copper, or that it was just a choice for sound quality. There's some controversy about that. In my opinion, I believe it was a little bit of both. Iron does have a little bit more of a mellow sound than copper, and so these strings sound a little more mellow. We will look at that later. You can also see at some point somebody put these knobs on here. This was not my work, but I left them because it's part of the history of the piano. These ugly kitchen knobs that were put on the piano. We can also look at the key tops. I did not do these key tops. These key tops were here when I got the piano. And you can see, well, I don't know if you can see, but I can see they're not real well done. There's a little bit of overhang or not enough. Some of them are a little twisted, crooked. The fronts don't line up. So that's just kind of an interesting historical observation of when they redid this piano. I'm sure originally it had ivory keys on it, but those ivories were taken off and the plastic was put on, but it was done in a sort of sloppy way. So that's what this piano has lived with for quite some time now. We can also see underneath there's a lot of room for player parts. The pedals are even extra suppressed down onto the bottom board there so that the player parts can fit more easily. Okay, so now I'm gonna play it for you. We'll see what it sounds like. Okay, so I have it open and I'm ready to play it. So let's see what it sounds like. I'm gonna play a little bit of a Chopin mazurka here. Sounds pretty good, huh? Yeah, so a little bit more mellow in the bass. That could be from old strings, but also from the iron. I think these hammers are actually the original hammers. They didn't have a whole lot of felt left on them when I worked on them. So I'm pretty sure the original 1919 hammers, but it's amazing how good hammers that old still sound. They're over 100 years old, these hammers, and they still sound pretty good. So it's amazing what you can do with old pianos. Also, what's interesting is we have an open face pin block here, which means there's no metal surrounding the pins. It's just the pin block. It's just open air and then the pins in the pin block. It's easier for tuning. It usually has a better sound because the pins are right against the wood and there's no metal in between, so they can't bend around. Good for tuning stability. It's also usually a demonstration of a nicer piano. for whatever reason. So great. Thanks for joining me, and I hope you enjoyed this piano.